In this lecture you will learn the basics of 3D terminology. Here is a list of what you will learn. Maybe you know all of this already, then you can skip this lecture. Are you still there? Good! Grab your mouse and follow along. We already talked about selecting in the last lecture, but there are some more ways of doing that. So we talked about left clicking on an object to select, but you can also deselect by clicking on an empty space. You can click on A to select all objects and then click on Alt-A to deselect all. And instead of Alt-A, you can also click on A twice to deselect all. You can also use box select to select objects. If you're on the default box select tool, you can just left click and then drag and then select the objects you want. To deselect objects, press Ctrl on your left mouse button and drag a box around the objects you want to deselect. In the previous lecture I talked about the active object. The active object is the latest object selected, so it has a bright orange outline. The properties of the active object will appear in the properties panel here. So as you can see, when I select the camera, you see the properties of the camera here, camera, and here you see its properties. When I select a lamp, as you can see here, a lamp. In the viewport, you can also find the select menu. If you open this menu, you'll find a range of selection options. You can find the active camera here, for example, and if you select that, the active camera will be selected. If you want, you can play with these options in the select menu, but there are a few that won't be working, because they only work in edit mode. I will explain about edit mode later in this lecture. Let's now talk about the transform options, which you can find in the first quick menu, the tool menu. Let's make sure that the tool menu is in view by hitting T. So let's first start moving the cube. You can do this by going to the tool menu and hitting the move tool. This will make the move manipulators visible. As you can see, we have 3 arrows and 3 squares, and when we click and drag on the red arrow, we can move along the x-axis. When you click on the blue square, you can move along the x and the y-axis. And as you can see, the Z is the blue color. So the color that you select and drag is the one that is excluded. The blue one in this case. You can also click anywhere on the viewport to move the cube along your view. As with all transformations, if you want to cancel out, click the right mouse button before letting go of your left mouse button during the transformation. Another way to cancel out is hitting escape. Oops, that's a little bit too much. You can reset any transformation of an object by hitting Alt-G. So now we know how to move our object. Next thing we want to do is to learn how to rotate our object. So go to the quick menu and click on the rotation tool. And look at the cube, and there you have the rotation manipulators. You can choose any color to rotate around that axis. But there are 2 more manipulators. The white ring here and the grey circle inside. The white ring can be used to rotate the object around your view, as if your object is on a piece of paper in front of you and that you turn that piece of paper around. And to rotate freely, you can click and drag on the grey circle. Like so. You can drag all the way, and it's not really controllable, but if you like that chaos, go ahead. And same as with moving an object, right mouse click to cancel and left mouse click to confirm. And you can use Alt-R to reset the rotation. So when I've rotated, hit Alt-R and it'll snap back to the original rotation. So we've moved and rotated the cube. Next is scaling. And as you can see, the manipulators changed again, and this time they look kind of like marshmallows. So same as with the move tool, you can click on either one of the manipulators, but this time you scale them. So blue for the z-axis, green for the y-axis, and the red one for the x-axis. And again, same as with move, when you hit the blue square, you scale in every direction except the z direction. So if you want to scale in all directions, click anywhere in the viewport and drag, and you will scale the cube. Big, small, big, small. You can also scale in all directions by clicking on the white circle and just drag. Again, you can right click to reassign or left click to confirm. And again, in this case, to reset your scaling, hit Alt-S. Now let's talk about the difference between global and local space. Let's see, you have an object rotated and you want to move it in the z-axis, for example, or any axis. As you can see, you can move it up, but you can only move it up in the world z-axis. If you want to move it up in its own z-axis, switch from global to local here. And now you can move the object in its own x-axis. You can move the object in its own z-axis. And you can move the object in its own y-axis. Now let's reset all transformations by hitting Alt-G, Alt-R and Alt-S. I have another quick tip for you. If you want to transform an object but the transformation goes too fast, you can always click Shift during the transformation. So for example, I here move to the y-axis and I click Shift, and as you can see it goes a lot slower and you can be very precise that way. You can use it on any value, so for example here in the second quick menu, if you drag on this number and hit Shift, you can increase or decrease the value very precise. And let's reset all the transformations because I want to talk to you about something. And I know I sound like a dad, but listen up. The use of these manipulators take a lot of time. For example, when I want to move something, I can move it up, down. But then when I want to rotate it, I have to go all the way to the toolbar again and go back and then rotate it. And I can do it like that. Then when I want to go to local or world mode, I have to switch again. I have to move again. So all in all, you need a lot of mouse mileage when you use the tools and the manipulators. And I'm not saying these tools are a bad thing, because when you use a tablet, these widgets are perfect. So don't forget about them. But when you are box modeling, there's a better way. And that's by using shortcuts. It is much faster. There are a lot in Blender, so there's a lot to learn. So let me lay them out to you in the next part of this lecture. So let's first reset the transformations by hitting Alt-S, Alt-R and Alt-G. And let's select the select box here. And let's stay on that for the next part of this lecture. Please follow along while I show you these shortcuts. And make sure you have an object selected, so in this case the cube. And the first thing we'll do is move the cube around by pressing G for grab. And then when you want to constrain around the x-axis, just hit the X on your keyboard, hit Y to constrain around the y-axis and hit Z to constrain around the z-axis. Then hit Shift X to exclude the x-axis, then hit Shift Z to exclude the z-axis and hit Shift Y to exclude the y-axis. And as always, hit the right mouse button or escape to cancel out. And a reminder, if you want to reset the location of your object, hit Alt-G and your object will snap back. When we transform an object by hitting G, we can also switch to other transformation tools like scale or rotate by hitting the corresponding keys. So as you can see here, we hit G to move the object, then we hit R to rotate, then we hit S to scale, and we can hit G again to go back to the move transformation. Have a good look at the information bar at the bottom of your screen, because here you can see which shortcuts are available when you do a transformation. Next up is rotation. Hit R to rotate around the view plane. Hit X to constrain around the x-axis, Y to constrain around the y-axis and Z to constrain around the z-axis. And when you hit R twice, so when you hit R to rotate and then R again, you can rotate freely. And again use Alt-R to reset your rotation. The last transformation is scale. Hit S to scale. And again, to constrain around the x-axis, hit the X, Y, or Z for the z-axis. And again, hit Shift and the angle you want to exclude from the scaling. So Shift X, Shift Y, or Shift C. Hit Escape or right mouse button to cancel out. And let's scale this up first, because Alt-S will reset the scaling again. If you don't want to rotate around the origin of the object, so you want to rotate around another pivot point, you can choose the 3D cursor as the pivot point in the pivot point menu. Then choose the 3D cursor in the menu, and replace the 3D cursor to a different point. Go back to the select box tool, because you can also replace the cursor by hitting Shift and clicking on the right mouse button. And then, for example, rotate around that pivot point. You can also constrain the X, the Y, or the Z axis again. And hit Escape to cancel out. And let's set your pivot point back to a medium point. You can use a different pivot point for other transformations as well. Maybe you remember we also snapped the cube to the 3D cursor using the menu here. Snap the 3D cursor, that one, there you go. But there's a shortcut for that one as well, so let's move the cursor again. Do you remember the shortcut? Shift right mouse button. And then with Shift S, the spy menu shows up, and here at number 8 you can hit it on the numpad as well. Your selection snaps to the 3D cursor. Then when you hit Shift S again and you look at this part, that's under the 1 on the numpad, you can snap your object to the world origin. Do you remember the difference between global and local space? Here in this menu you can see global and local space. There's a shortcut to switch between those two as well. Let's rotate the cube first, and hit G to move it, hit C to constrain around the Z axis, and here we have the global axis. Now hit C again, and now we move around the local axis. When we hit X, we move along the X axis, and hit X again, and we move along the local X axis. Of course, same goes for the Y, but let's escape to cancel out, and hit Alt R to reset the rotation of the cube. And that's it for the transformation shortcuts. Those are not the only shortcuts of course, but the rest you will learn along the way. I want to talk about object versus edit mode now. All manipulations we did so far in this lecture were done on object mode. Object mode is, as the name already says it, a place where you can manipulate objects. But an object itself can manipulate in a lower level as well. So you go inside an object and then change the shape of the object. So let's do that. Let's go to the mode menu and switch to edit mode. And in edit mode you can see that the cube is made up out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points. And all those points are selected by default. Hit A twice or Alt A to deselect all points. So again hit A to select all, and hit Alt A to deselect. These points are called vertices or vertex in singular. Left click with your mouse on one of these vertices to select them. All these vertices make up this cube because these are all connected, and connected vertices are called edges. There's an edge here, there's an edge here, there's an edge here, and there's an edge here, and these 4 edges make up this face. So to recap, the points are called vertices or singular vertex, the lines between the points are called edges, and 4 edges make a face. And same as with the objects before, we can manipulate the vertices in different ways. So let's first deselect the vertices we have selected by pressing Alt A, and select this vertex again, and start manipulating with the shortcuts we learned. We can press G to move, we can press R to rotate, but nothing happens as you can see. And then we can press S to scale, and again nothing happens. And we can't rotate or scale because we are selecting a point, and a point is just one single point in space, and we can't rotate or scale that. We have one vertex selected now, and if we want to select the second one as well, we press Shift and then click with the left mouse button on the second vertex. Now we have 2 selected. And then with Shift again, click on the third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, sixth. And we also have 2 faces selected now as you can see. Click Alt A to deselect everything again. We did all this in vertex select mode. So in edit mode, there's a second mode or sub mode, it's called vertex select mode. There's also an edge select mode. Click on that one. And then try to select the vertex. And what happens? You didn't select the vertex, but you selected the edge next to it. Which makes sense because we are in edge select mode. And also edges can be manipulated. So hit G to move an edge. Hit X to constrain around the x-axis, hit Y to constrain around the y-axis and C around the z-axis. Right mouse button or escape to cancel out the manipulation. Next up is rotation, hit R to rotate. Constrain around the x-axis won't work because we are on the x-axis, z-axis, y-axis. And you can also scale, so make it smaller on the x-axis, constrain x, y won't work, and z won't work either because there is no y or z direction on this edge. And to clarify a bit, I'll rotate the cube, and as you can see on these directions, there's nothing for this edge. And you can't scale nothing. There's only something in the x direction, so that's what you can scale. I do hope that makes sense. Okay, and then there's another select mode, that's the face select mode. You can see it over here. So let's select that and play along and select some faces. And also in face select mode we can manipulate the faces. So press G to move a face, X to constrain X, Y to constrain the Y-axis and C for the Z-axis. We can rotate a face by hitting R, rotate, C, X and Y constrain. And then we can scale a face as well. Hitting S, scale, make it smaller, bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller, bigger. And Z to constrain the Z-axis, X to constrain the X-axis, but the Y-axis doesn't work because there is no Y direction on this face. Let's scale this one and hit escape or right mouse button to cancel out. And next up is the X-ray button here. So when you press the X-ray button, you can see through the cube. Let me hit Alt-A first to deselect all and turn the X-ray off. The only thing you see here are the faces that are in view. So the ones that are in the back are invisible. You can only select the faces that are in view. Let's hit Alt-A again to deselect everything. And then let's turn on the X-ray again. And as you can see, now you can see through the cube and see the faces on the back as well. When you go to Vertex mode, you can now select all the vertices in front. But also the one you normally can't see, that's this one, the one that's in the back. Let me grab it for you, move around. This one. And also when you switch to Edge Select mode, you can select the edges in the front and the ones in the back. And now let's go to Face Select mode and select the face in the front. So when we select this one, just click somewhere in the face. But how do we select the ones in the back? Let's first deselect and have a look at these little dots here. When you want to select the face, you have to left click on the dot or the point that belongs to that face. So when I click on the point in the middle of the front face, you select that one. When you click near the point on the face on the back, you select that one. This one, the left rear, the bottom, and the left front. Smart, eh? So that's all about the X-ray button for this lecture. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. Let's go to the next one, where we will start box modeling the well. So we will really start modeling in the next lecture. Bye bye!